Hello, welcome to He Tree Activity Center in the heart of Dartmoor National Park in Devon, England. Now, if you check out the surroundings here, we're in quite a pristine area. We've got trees of every shape, size, and color. We've got beautiful forests and hills and mountains and a variety of animals as well. And if you're a local here, there's a certain amount of fear and respect that they have for the Dartmoor area. Don't know if you're aware of it, but there's some legends and myths that sort of surround that area. The most famous being the hound from hell that would roam the marshes outside of Baskerville Hall, made famous by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's mystery, Sherlock Holmes, Hound of the Baskervilles. So I don't believe the locals really believe there's a hound from hell that goes around the moors, but they do have a certain amount of fear and respect for their environment, because what lies behind these hills and in between are vast valleys of marshes that contain bogs and lots of dangerous footing out there. So for the unwary, uninformed traveler, it can be a dangerous environment. And so while they have that fear and respect of that area, it kind of reminded me of the fear that we're supposed to have when we do look at creation, the fear of the Lord. David, when he's looking at just the creation of man, he's looking at his own body, and he says, I will praise him because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And this is King David. This is far before you could take out the human eye and dissect it and look at it under a microscope and see the genius in the creation and design of the human eyeball. He's just looking at the form of a human saying, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And lots of people know that verse and David's thoughts there, but what he goes on to say is, how marvelous are your works. My soul knows that very well. And I think that is the key. I think the key really is that the fear of the Lord, the fear of him in terms of not, I'm afraid of God, but like an honor and a respect of him because I see how grand his design is something that is rooted in the heart of man, the soul. It is the seat of the mind and the will and the emotions of every human being. That's exactly what the wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon, was getting at when his wise sayings were collected into the book of Proverbs, which is much more than a collection of pithy sayings, but really an instruction on fearing the Lord. He says in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But he tells us in chapter 2, verse 10, this, when wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is in your soul, then you will have discretion. It will preserve you. Understanding will keep you. I guess the question is, wisdom and fear, what is the connection between those two things? Well, Job answers it really, really well. Job does this, where can wisdom be found game? Can it be found in the depths? No, it's not there. Can it be found in Sheol? No, it's not there. Can you buy it with gold and silver? And can you buy it with anything? No, it's not even the rubies. It doesn't even compare with rubies. And so God enters the scene and says, well, I'll tell you where wisdom can be found. When I look upon my creation, I think of wind or the borders of the sea or the path of the thunderbolt. God says, I see wisdom, and I've told man, behold, the fear of the Lord. That is wisdom. That is wisdom. And so Job says, listen, if you want to know what wisdom really is, it's fearing him. That's where it begins. And so while the locals are very wise to have a proper respect and fear of their environment, what that fear does for every man is awakens in them a knowledge of the Holy One, our Creator. Just recently, we had a solar eclipse that passed through America, United States, and people traveled all over thousands of miles to get into the path of the totality where they would see the total eclipse. And if you listen to the remarks of people as they watched that, as they observed the eclipse, many of them had a deep emotional response. Not necessarily believers, not people that believed in God, but people just saw something so amazing and they deeply, emotionally were affected by that. Why is that? Well, God tells us that. Paul tells us that in Romans chapter 1, that the creation has been displayed so that it would evoke emotion in us, that we would see a God's hand behind creation, and that we would worship Him. Sadly, mankind has chosen to exchange worship of the Creator for worship of the creation. And we're called to worship Him and Him alone. David says in Psalm 8, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers," he's just blown away. He says, "What is man that you are even mindful of him?" See, creation, as we look around at such a beautiful surrounding, even as this, should evoke in us a deep respect and reverent awe of our God, who loved us so much that He sent His Son to die for us.